Hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Ari and I read 30 books in the month of January. Because I got 30 books to talk about, let's get into this as quickly as possible and start out with stats. I read, as I just said, 30 books, 10,903 pages, which roughly averages into 352 pages per day or 363 pages per book. The genre of the books I read, 19 of them were fantasy, surprising no one. 5 were horror. I'm not sure why I'm reading so many horror books in January, but I ain't mad at it. 2 nonfiction books, 1 general fiction, 1 mystery, 1 sci-fi, and 1 short story collection. The gender of the authors that I read, 25 of them were female, 3 were male, and 2 were multiple authors of multiple genders. The demographic of the books I read, this is basically the only month that you're going to see something other than adult as number 1, and that's young adult. I read 17 young adult books, 12 adult books, and 1 middle grade, which is very weird for me, but I think I'm going to read 2 in February. The source, 14 of the books that I read were backlist titles. 9 of them were for my library, 4 of them were ARCs, 2 book box books, and 1 book that I purchased for myself recently. Format, 21 of them were physical copies, 6 ebooks, 2 audiobooks, and 1 that I read is both a physical and an audio. I have a new stat this year, and that is, have I read this author before or not? So 12 of these authors were new to me, authors I've never read before, and 18 of them were authors that I had read before. Star ratings. Now this was a very average month, I guess is how we're going to put it. I had 1 5-star. The very last book I read in the month was my only 5-star book. I had 11 4 stars, 14 3 stars, 4 2 stars, and no 1 stars. There wasn't anything that I really hated, and I felt like it was a good reading month even if I didn't have anything like really high. And no DNFs this month. From there, let's talk about what I read. Alright, at the end of the month, I put out a favorites and fails video where I read Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, The Final Girl Support Group by Grady Hendrix, Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Bully, Bunny by Mona Awad, A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, and Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. For some reason in that video, I lost the clip of me talking about Amari, so I'll tell you about it here, but if you want to know anything about all of these other books, just check out that video instead of me talking about it here. So Amari was fantastic, but it was middle grade, so it's only a 4-star for me because I'm an adult. I'm an old woman, and middle grade concepts are always a little too simplistic and too childish for me. So it's never anything that I'm just in love with, even though I think that the story in Amari and the Night Brothers was fantastic. I highly recommend it for basically anybody. It's a cute little story, and I will definitely be continuing with this series. The next group of books that I'm going to redirect you to another video for are the ARCs that I read for the month of January. I had 4 ARCs in January. Obsidian by Sarah Daly. Cute cover, awful book. Servant Mage by Kate Elliott. Fantastic novella. Highly recommend. How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu. Interestingly written. Some people might like it, some people might not. This one's if it sounds really interesting to you, read it. If it doesn't, avoid it. And then Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. The story in this one was fantastic, but the romance was ick. So every January, I make it a goal to try to read as many books, continuing series as I can, just to kind of start fresh on that insane list that I have by the end of every year. One of those books, or one of the series that I finished out this year, was the Girls with Razor Hearts series by Suzanne Young, and I finished that by reading Girls with Rebel Souls. This series finished off fine. It wasn't nearly as bad as the Treatment series. But yeah, it's... How do I describe this? So if you take feminism and take fighting against how women are treated, where they're blamed for their own sexual assaults, teenage boys will be boys and get away with a lot of stuff that they shouldn't do, while young girls are often looked at as sexual objects while being told that they need to do everything. They need to be pretty, but they can't actually have sex or have any control of their bodies. So take that general reality about being a woman in our society and make it a really intense teen drama. And that's what this series is. It's sci-fi, I would say. I'm not going to give away the big plot twist that makes it sci-fi, but it's an interesting concept that has been like really, really overblown. Next up, I read the book that I pulled out of my jar of doom for last month's Dungeon of Books, and this is Dark Souls by Paula Morris. This is a book that I got in a book box years and years ago. It was like a young adult sci-fi fantasy book box. And this follows a girl who was in a car crash where her best friend was killed, and since that day she's been able to see ghosts. Her brother was also in the same car crash, and he, since that day, has had like a fear of tight spaces. What is that called? Claustrophobia. And doesn't like being like trapped in a moving vehicle. But for some reason they go from like Ohio to England. I'm not sure how her brother makes it across the Atlantic in an airplane. This isn't a good book and they don't explain a lot of things, but she gets there and she sees ghosts and she kind of falls in love with these two boys. One of them might be a ghost, both of them might be a ghost, she's not really sure. And from there, like, drama ensues. So, this is awful. The way the story plays out is, like, too much coincidence. Like, it's unbelievable levels of coincidence and insane bullshit. The way that this plays out and comes together at the end, it's like, there's no way that would happen. This is ridiculous. Like, what? What are you people talking about? But yeah, this was awful. A lot of plot holes, a lot of like overwhelming coincidence. This is not worth anybody's time. Next up, I read The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater, like the whole ass series, which is The Raven Boys, The Dream Thieves, Blue Lily, Lily Blue, and The Raven King. I liked The Raven Boys. This is my second time reading it. I like The Raven Boys. I didn't like the rest of the series. I did not care so hard. You don't even understand. But if you would like to hear me talk more about my experience reading these books, I do have an entire vlog, which I will link in the eye or down in the comments, or maybe both. After The Raven Boys, I decided to tackle the Grishaverse. I read the Shadow and Bone trilogy and then the Six of Crows duology. I'm missing Six of Crows. I got that from the library because my copy is in storage somewhere. But Shadow and Bone trilogy, I thought it was okay. The romance like ruins the book. Also, Mal's a douchebag. Like, who roots for this man? Anyway, okay, I'm glad I read it to learn more about the Grisha, but didn't really care. Six of Crows duology was much better. Looking forward to reading the King of Scars duology and finishing out the series, but there's a whole video on these if you want to check that out. I'll link it somewhere. Next up, I finish out the Aurora Cycle by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. While I like this book, I don't like the author, Jay Kristoff. He has shown himself to be very problematic when it comes to how he over-sexualizes young girls, and doesn't or hasn't responded well to any criticism he's received about, like, hey, it's kind of creepy that you as an adult man are over-sexualizing these children. maybe chill. His responses have been kind of gross and sarcastic. I also think there was another incident where he was accused of cultural appropriation, and his responses were also kind of disgusting. So, I didn't really want to support him as an author anymore, but I wanted to finish out this series, so I did that, and I liked it. Like, I gave this book 4 stars. This was a very good ending to a series. I enjoyed my time reading this book. Don't get me wrong on that front. I just don't think I'm ever going to read anything by J. Kristoff again, because I don't feel comfortable supporting an adult man who sexualizes little kids. It's icky, even if they are fictionalized little kids. So, yeah, not gonna talk about that anymore, but moving on. Next up, the short story collection I read was a book called Once Upon a Book Club Presents 12 Days of Book Clubmas, and this is a short story collection that comes with an advent calendar. You read a short story every day and then get a corresponding advent with it. Why am I reading this in January? Because the advent calendar for Christmas didn't show up until well after Christmas. There will be a video out on this soon, I think Thursday or Tuesday. I don't know. It'll be out soon. Just know that I did read the short story collection to open the advent calendar. Next up, I finished a nonfiction audiobook called Women and Other Monsters by Jess Zimmerman. This audiobook compares monstrous females from Greek mythology to, like, this situation of modern day women, or supposedly. It's more of like her personal life situation. So instead of reading like she's comparing monsters to women, she's comparing monsters to herself. So it reads more like an autobiography. This was okay. Maybe if I was more interested in Greek mythology, I would have gotten more out of this. It felt like an autobiography about a woman who really, really likes Greek mythology, which in the end I think that's what it was, even if it's not necessarily marketed that way. So, okay, if it sounds interesting to you, I don't have any reason why you shouldn't read it, but it was a firm okay for me. Next, after that, I caught up again with the Wayward Children series and read Where the Drowned Girls Go by Seanan McGuire. And I can't tell you enough how much I hate the character Cora in this book. She is awful to read her perspective from. Cora is a mermaid and she's fat. And you know what? That's fine. Like, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being fat, but this girl's entire personality is obsessing about her own weight. She has an eating disorder, where she like starves herself in an attempt to lose weight. She is always obsessed about what other people are thinking about her because of her weight, always just assuming the worst out of everybody around her. No boys can find her pretty because she's fat. Everybody's secretly making fun of her behind her back, and that is literally her entire character. We get almost nothing about her being a mermaid other than she has like blue hair, like naturally growing blue hair. But her obsession with her own weight just drives me nuts. And the thing is, no other character in the book ever says anything about her weight unless they are specifically and entirely being set up to be a bad guy. If somebody is being set up to be a bad guy in this book, they will comment about her weight, which has happened like maybe once or twice. But outside of that, absolutely no one but her gives two slight fucks about her weight. And it's just Like, I have no problem reading from fat characters. I like fat characters in my book, but it's the obsessiveness about... It's the obsessiveness and putting her entire personality around something about herself that she hates is what I don't like. It just happens that that is her weight, but if any character was entirely obsessed with something about themselves that they hate, I would feel the same way about it. So, hopefully, this is the last book we have to read from Cora's perspective, because I really hate reading about Cora. Another novella that I finished was Drowned Country by Emily Tesh. This is the second book in the Green Hollow duology, and the first one is Silver in the Woods, I think, or Silver in the Wood. I love Silver in the Wood. It was fantastic. This book didn't need to exist. There's no point to this book. I lost the magic of the first book, and it seemed like the author wanted to create a conflict in the relationship from the first book, and so she just made this book so they could make up. Like, we didn't see the conflict on page. It had happened in between the two books, but they're broken up. The people who ended up in a relationship at the end of the first book are now broken up, and they're forced back together to solve a mystery about a vampire. And then, of course, they get back together and they're all in love. But it didn't need to exist. Like, that conflict, it's a fictional story. That conflict did not need to exist. So I think this should have ended up as a standalone. And if you read the first book, just don't bother with the second. It's not worth your time. It's just not as good. Next up is the last book in the Iskari series, which is The Skyweaver. I liked The Last I'm Sorry, which is the first book. Then whatever the second book was, is this in here? I don't remember what the second book was, but I hated it. Oh my god, did that go heavy on the miscommunication trope. And so I kept putting off reading this because the second book in this series was awful. But I finally got around to this. I was like, okay, I have this book, I own it, I just need to read it. This one was okay. It wasn't great, but it was okay. Overall, this series is fine, especially if you like young adult fantasy, but it's nothing new, nothing amazing, nothing groundbreaking. The next series I completed after that was the Belle series, where I read The Everlasting Rose. I think it has established itself as a solid 3 stars. It was fine. I didn't really particularly like the Belles to begin with, and this one went a little bit off the rails as far as like not as an interesting or compelling story as the first book, which happens a lot in these series or duologies, let me tell you. But it did kind of like give you answers, give you a conclusion to the plot twist that we had at the end of book 1. So, fine. I have nothing wrong with it. It's just not super memorable or super exciting, which is fine. Not all books have to be. After that, I read The Haunting of Leah Harker from a book box, which you would have seen the video go up for this like 2 days ago, I think. The first part, like first 100 pages of this, is entirely fucking creepy. Like, just the sense of dread, the anxiety I had while reading it, peak. Perfect. Exactly what I want in this book. Fantastic. There's no way that level of anxiety could have lasted for the full 300 pages, so eventually they switched it up, and it turned into kind of like a mystery of trying to figure out, like, where this ghost came from, who killed them, why they haven't moved on, you know, typical ghost things. And that got a bit ridiculous. Again, the coincidences in this book are just fucking absurd. Super unrealistic, lost a little bit of its sparkle from that, but like I liked the scary parts of the book. I liked the friendship that the ghost and the main character had made. I liked the plot twist was was a little bit silly, a little bit overdone, but I didn't mind it. But I liked this. I didn't love it, but I did like it. And if you want to see more thoughts and the unboxing of the little presents that came with this, I'll link that somewhere. And the final book that I read this month, I actually had pulled it as a bonus Jar of Doom pull. I don't remember why I needed to pull an extra Jar of Doom pick from December, but there obviously was a reason for it, and I pulled it and pulled Coming of Age in Mississippi by Anne Moody. This is a autobiography about a girl who grew up poor and black in Mississippi. She was born in like the 1940s and went through the civil rights movement as an activist. But do I really want to read a 400-page biography by now, or right now, that was written in the 1960s? Because a lot of the stuff that I've read that is written in the 1960s has the most flowery, overdone writing, or just like problematic content, which comes with the territory. Like this one's guaranteed to have racism in it, I knew that, but I was gonna read it, I just kind of kept putting it off. And of course it's the only 5-star I had the entire month, was the book that I was like, I don't know if I actually want to read this. I'll give it a try, but I'm going to put it off as long as possible. 5 stars, of course. This is fantastically written. She has such a great conversational tone where, like, how do I describe this? You've ever had an old person sit down and tell you a story and you're kind of like, oh no, this is going to be so long, and then you just get super engaged with whatever they're saying? That's how this is written. And it's just her life from early childhood. You've got family drama, we go through childhood, we go through high school, and then college, and then some activist work that she does after college. And it's interesting, it's good. She doesn't really have like the worst life imaginable, so it's relatable. Awful because she's a black woman in Mississippi in the 1960s, but not like trauma porn like The Color Purple. It was also interesting reading about the civil rights movement from somebody who wasn't a leader of the civil rights movement. This is a poor black woman. She's running her body ragged. She's not giving speeches. She's on the front lines, like setting in these protests and getting physically assaulted by white people and cops and things like that, endlessly harassed. But she's not one of the people like you hear about like all the time, like Malcolm X or Martin Luther King Jr. And it's also interesting hearing from the perspective of a woman in the civil rights movement instead of a man. So I highly recommend this. This is one of those books that it's lovely to just take your time with and read a little bit every day or so. But this is very much well worth reading if you were interested in picking it up. But that is a very long video of all 30 books that I read in January. If you made it this far in the video, leave me an emoji down below in the comments. I just want to see who listens to me talk this long. Anyway, I'll see ya in the next video. Bye.